Hello, welcome back. It is week 130 on Out on That Line. I'm Jeff with my co host Alex. As always, Alex, how are you this week?
You're keeping it right here with the podcast that brings the drip with wet vagina. That's right, a Doja Cat reference from way back. Let's see if we can get demonetized in the first 30 seconds. Jeff, I'm thriving over here, but I gotta know, how are you doing?
I'm doing quite well. Right now, better than I think I'm going to be when we start talking about the album that we're doing this week.
Good.
It's spoiler alert. It's going to be the new Rolling Stones album called Hackney Diamonds. Um, Fitting hack is a good set of letters to have in there. I'll say that. But we'll get to that a little later. But what it kind of brought up to me was this idea of like, when do you hang it up? If you're one of these legacy acts, what's your threshold for? Is it cool that they're still going out there and like letting it rip? Is like kind of where do you draw the line on where they should draw the line, if you know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, I would say there's a physical component to it, right? Like last year, watching Phil Collins perform Invisible Touch seated in a chair, looking like he's got the opioid sweats, just she seemed to have an invisible touch, just like clearly in crippling pain. Motherfucker can't play the drums anymore. They
Mhm.
trot him out for a final Genesis tour. It's elder abuse. So I would say they should have drawn the line way before that physically. The guy can
Mhm.
still sing though. But yeah, that's an interesting question is like talent wise, inspiration wise, where do you draw the line? I would also argue that the Rolling Stones probably should have kept that line where it was a long time ago when their last album came out cuz ooh boy, but I guess I want to hear what your criteria
So
would
I
be.
think I am totally cool with bands that, if you're at the level of the Rolling Stones, when you're like considered one of the greatest rock and roll bands of all time, or at least one of the most important, and certainly in your time, like if you're in the conversation with, do you prefer the Rolling Stones or the Beatles? I mean, you've got to be a pretty big deal to even be in that conversation. So if they want to continue to play tours and continue to play those songs, like I see no problem with it because you honestly, like you watch Mick Jagger perform live, and of anybody in that age group, like that man's still got it more than anybody in that age group does. And I will say, none of the singing or lyrics have really ever been that stressful, I guess. Um, as the singer of the Rolling Stones, there's certainly some great vocal work. Um, Gimme Shelter is known for the vocal work, not his, but it's known for that. So the Rolling Stones are like, the voice is an important thing in their songs. It's not just about the beat or the blues guitar or the great drumming, because they had a great drummer too. It's really just the attitude, it's the whole production. It had more of an edge than the Beatles. That's why people like them. I think the Rolling Stones kind of pissed parents off more than the Beatles did. And I think that was their goal. And my problem with legacy bands, and especially the Rolling Stones, they got to be the best example of this, is when you have that attitude of this like youthful rebellion, like that's your thing. It's hard to have that, hold on to that into your 40s after like a string of number one albums and number one hits and like dating every model in the world. It's hard to like have that same sort of scrappy attitude as you get to that age, let alone in your 80s, which is where they're at now. It's just, it's hard to buy into. I have no problem if they would just want to go play those songs, if they can still get up on that stage and do it and people still want to buy a ticket, more power to them. But I just feel like if you cannot honestly like change your songwriting, how you perform, like how you put these things out there essentially versus how you think it should have been done when you were like 19 years old, you've got some work to do. There's some good examples of people that really aged up well in their music. I mean, obviously I'm going to shout out Bruce Springsteen, but he's like a very different style of songwriting from Born to Run and Darkness on the Edge of Town era all the way up to the newest, like the Letter to You album. It's just like there's artists that can do it and have done it well. And then there's artists that just like are cemented in a sound and an attitude, and it's really tough to carry that through.
Well, and that's one of the bigger problems with this album is instead of steering into the fact that they're older than the dirt that they sleep in, they tried to recapture that, like, youthful rebellion, and it just sounds fake as shit, and it required a lot of production to try to polish it up. So the end result is Jagger sounds as young and as vibrant as he ever did, but I don't mean that as a compliment because it's so clearly been run through a machine and pressed and polished and turned into this. So I think they didn't lean into their age and experience. Charlie Watts, the fucking drummer, died, and he was like the heartbeat of the Rolling Stones. You don't want to write any songs about that? I get it if you don't have it in the tank or it's too painful. You don't have it in the tank or it's too painful. But all of these songs on this album, and I guess I'm like kind of transitioning into the
Mhm.
album review, and I don't want to bury the lead. This thing was dog dinner, but it there was just like nothing about it rang true. Nothing about it was interesting. I had a fucking birthday waiting for this thing to end. It's just 45 minutes that felt like 45 hours. I felt like I was watching Wagner's Ring Cycle. But they didn't play into anything that would have made this work or made this interesting. They like artificially forced themselves to give us what we want, which is the rebellious, youthful rock and roll Stones. And I'm coming into this as someone who actively does not like the Rolling Stones. Gimme Shelter gets a pass because of Scorsese,
Mhm.
but I can't, otherwise I can't do it. Sympathy for the Devil, I'm not into it. I just never understood the appeal of the Rolling Stones because to me, the music was not that good. You ask, who do you got, Stones or Beatles? You know what my answer is?
Neither.
Beach Boys.
Oh.
So, um, because I would say arguably they were the most creative and interesting group at that time, but that's a major digression. My point
Mhm.
is, I'm not a Rolling Stones guy. I went into this trying to suspend that judgment and really audit this on its own strengths and weaknesses. And it was just for me all weaknesses. The lyrics are just like flat and lazy, and it's I'm gonna go to Morocco to escape this lifestyle that I simultaneously am praising. It's
Yeah.
confused. It's all over the place. It's what I like to call nursing home rock.
This there were so many contradictions in this album. It was
Ugh.
absolutely insane. It was all about like I just want to get away from it all, my own private island, like no phone, no radio, nothing. And the next song is like I love to party. I love being around people. I love being in the mix. And it's just the most infuriating thing because honestly, you mentioned he hasn't sounded this like fresh and young and like vibrant in years, and I can't imagine that this is how it sounds live. Like I really just cannot bring myself to believe that. I guess I'll watch a YouTube video or something. But the he talks about a landlord on two separate songs, like two separate. He doesn't have a landlord. He probably doesn't know anybody that has a landlord. Like, what are you talking about, Mick? I mean,
He's had a landlord in 65 years.
like I cannot get my head around how like overall this sounds like the Rolling Stones always did. Like this sounds you if you told me this was a Rolling Stones album, I'd be like, you're damn right it's a Rolling Stones album. But outside of that, I don't know how you write these songs. Like seriously, how you like sing these songs and you want to be taken seriously as a musician, as like an artist, or maybe you just don't care anymore, but it's one of those two things and neither one of them are good and they both mean you should just stop, just cut it out. And this album is getting a lot of praise like everywhere.
Ugh.
Like there's so many at magazines like, yeah, Rolling Stones still got it. I'm like, how do you possibly think that? You pick any song on here, there's something that Mick Jagger has not even like sniffed in 50 years.
Well, and what's so damning about this album is the fact that everyone's saying they still got it, and if you're me, you're like, "Oh, so they still suck." I'm sorry, I think they suck. I can't be like, "Well, give the devil his due." I think the Rolling Stones fucking suck. I'm sorry, and I know that's a steaming hot take, but it's my take. There are many like it, but this one is mine. And I do you reinvent? Do you steer into what worked? Do you find some kind of middle ground? Rolling Stone said, "No, fuck all of that. We're just going to show up and whatever generic turd comes out, we'll try to mold into an interesting shape in post." But it couldn't happen. It just this is the most derivative, boring, every single song sounds exactly the same. Keith Richards doesn't have a guy. The human handbag himself does not have a single memorable solo on this entire thing. There's one song that they let him captain.
And
He sings and he plays on it. Um, and it was one of the better ones, but that's faint and damning praise.
yeah.
It's just it's playing to the nostalgia and the goodwill of the people that grew up on this. Like, you know how you can't even say it's divorced dad rock because this is like grandfathers.
Oh, this is like boomer. This is straight boomer music.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah, and it shows because it's the product of people who reaped the benefits of a time in the world where truly was their oyster. They
Mhm.
could go and they could savage the world for all it was worth and get theirs. And then I know it's like an easy millennial thing to say, but they just left a disaster for the rest of us.
Mhm.
It started with Gen X. The Zoomers don't seem to care. God bless their pea pick and little hearts. But the boomers left an absolute disaster. And what an appropriate soundtrack to the decline of this country, of this culture, than this pile of crap.
Yeah, and I had an interesting thought, and and I want to see if I'm crazy here, but I think that the Rolling Stones were the Nickelback of the British invasion.
Whoa, that's an interesting way to put it. What does that make the Beatles then?
The Beatles, I think, would be like, let's say the Beatles are like the Queens of the Stone Age,
Okay.
because they're like I mean, as what however you feel about the Beatles, like they're the real deal when it comes to being actually influential and like having provided something to the I mean, from what they started, like just took over the planet, they were bigger than Elvis, which was wild to think about.
Yeah, the Beatles were there to
Yeah.
make music. The Rolling Stones were there to fuck chicks.
Yeah, and Beatles were far superior songwriters. Like there's a Beatles song for everybody. You know, there's they get heavy emotional, they're just like doing the hold my hand shit. But the Rolling Stones were like, yeah, they're like the Nickelback of the British invasion.
They're just I
And the Who would be like the Foo Fighters.
oh, you're not a Who guy, huh?
Not a little bit. Not less more, I guess more of a Who guy than I am a Rolling Stones guy, but neither one is that strong for me.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Tommy has a special place in my heart for reasons I can't
Yes.
get into on the show. Um, but yeah, I've never been a huge Who guy either. But I would love for someone to tell me what the appeal of the Rolling Stones was musically, because I understand the argument and it's a totally valid argument. Like, well, they brought that kind of bravado to
Mhm.
rock and roll, and it was an attitude and it was a lifestyle and it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And it's like, okay, but if we're focusing on the rock and roll component, I don't feel that they nailed it. Now, I didn't grow up with them. So somebody else, if
Mhm.
there's some boomer watching this, please tell me what the appeal of their music is, because it makes the Eagles sound listenable.
Mhm.
I would let Dave Grohl put his fucking dick in my mouth before gladly. with a smile on my face like a little donut before I would listen to this fucking album again, if that tells you anything.
Yeah, this is yes. Their appeal for me, like my favorite Rolling Stone songs are like the country songs. Like Sweet Virginia, Tumbling Dice, um, even Honky Tonk Woman. Like there's the country songs that the Rolling Stones do are pretty damn good. But they're known as a rock and roll band. Like if they had come out and been a country band that played some rock and roll songs, I might feel completely differently about them. But they are like what they do very well is they really did have an appreciation for country music, and they played like Sweet Virginia's a great song. I love that song. You can feel how you feel about it, I guess. Dead Flowers, I mean, phenomenal song. But what they're known for is like Brown Sugar, Satisfaction, Start Me Up. And they can't like they're how are you gonna relate to those songs now? He's like 118 years old, you know?
It's the soundtrack to going to Shaw's to buy a can of soup.
Yeah.
When I'm driving in my car, just like, ugh, it's
Like they just
boring. It's
weren't like the Who was definitely more like existential. You know, they were talking about more political stuff and like more personal and just like they were weirder. That's why I love the Who is because you have like Behind Blue Eyes, you have like Happy Jack. You know, you like there's very they get weird, and that's what I really enjoy. The Rolling Stones, like they were a blues rock band. They played some country songs, but they were like nitty gritty. They were dirty. Like we have always looked at it as like that we had the hindsight, like we were after. So like Led Zeppelin already existed, Nirvana's already existed, like the whole Sex Pistols and like punk movement already existed. So like where the Rolling Stones seem very tame to us compared to what came after. I mean, we lived through the new metal craze of the 2000s. And you want to try to tell me that the Rolling
barely.
Stones were rebellious, but in that time they were. They were the Two Live Crew of the music world in that time, which is crazy to think about. But they're still writing songs as if they're the Two Live Crew of the music world, and they haven't been relevant for like rebellious reasons in 45 years, 50 years.
Well, and I will give Keith Richards his due as a guitarist. I will give Charlie Watts due. I have nothing good to say about Mick Jagger.
He's just
Absolutely
there.
nothing.
Could have been
I
anybody.
don't
Yeah.
you seriously, you
Yeah.
could just pick some fucking heroin addict off the street and put a little baggie of China White on a fishing pole and dangle it over his head. He's just gonna fucking dance for it. And that's Mick Jagger. There is nothing special about him other than a gigantic set of lips and
Mhm.
some funky chicken dancing.
Yeah.
Never understood the appeal. He also seems like a tremendous douchebag. So what is there to root for? Again, because they got laid. I've never seen creative output from them as a whole. Again, I appreciate Keith Richards' talent
Mhm.
as a guitarist, but as a
That
whole,
makes one of us.
oh shit.
Yeah.
Jeff with a
Boo.
steaming hot take.
Boo. Oh man,
Oh,
him. Yeah, we can talk. Yeah, we can spin into that too.
spin,
Um,
baby, spin.
yeah, but this, I Charlie Watts, yes, full credit, phenomenal, fantastic drummer. What's his name? Bill Wyman, the bass player, also great. Also, I think married like a 16-year-old at one point. So
Well, not great.
you know, take what you will out of that. Um, they Mick Jagger's just useless generally, but Keith Richards consistently always gets ranked in like the top 20, top 15 of the greatest guitarists ever. Him, Eric Clapton. I mean, come on. They're like in just in their genres, there are better guitar players that they get ranked ahead of all the time. Now, Keith Richards, he may be like 85. I think his blood is only like 17. I think he gets like blood transfusions all the time just to try to like stay young or whatever. But I think they had some like good riffs and everything, but there was not anything that's complicated. Like a beginning guitar player can probably play most of Rolling Stones catalog very easily. It's just like not that crazy. Like when you already had the Beatles, and while their songs sounded simple, they had those crazy key changes all the time. Like the Beatles wrote like very complicated music.
Mhm.
And the Who was just doing some like crazy off the wall stuff, and Roger Daltrey doing these like guttural primal screams into the microphone. Like the Rolling Stones were just like, even in their time, I feel like just not that cool. That's why I say they're the Nickelback, because they were the easiest things. They're like, oh, they're representing rebellion. I want to be rebellious. I'm going to listen to that. Like without it having to be any good, people just bought into the attitude and all that, and it stuck. Even though there was so like far more talent, like Jimi Hendrix existed at this point. There
Mm.
was so like far more talented people doing more interesting things than the Rolling Stones, and yet it's cockroaches and Keith Richards is what we're gonna have when this shit with Iran and Russia and China and Israel all finally goes to hell. That's what's gonna be left. And I don't know if I want to live in that world.
Well, and hopefully Jagger's there to have sex with all the cockroaches. Fucking dirty.
Well, they won't
But
know he's not one of them at that point.
exactly. They'll be
Yeah.
like, you look like a desiccated
Yeah.
husk. We can get down with this." I again, I've just never seen the appeal. And here's the thing, when you suggested this, I remember being like, I don't know, man. I hate the Rolling Stones. Hate them.
Mhm.
Hate them. I don't know if I can be objective, even though that is always my mission. If I obviously don't know an act, like we do something like Lonnie Holly, I have no idea who that is. I go in as a total blank slate
Mhm.
and make a totally clean impression. Something that we're bullish on, like Tyler Childers or Olivia Rodrigo, I'm
Mhm.
predisposed to like it, but I can be objective if it's a plop. I can also be objective if Taylor Swift or Dave Grohl, Foo Fighters, what have you, want to make something that is truly worthwhile. I'm there for it. I will give every artist on this show the benefit of the doubt from a musical standpoint. I want to love everything. Change my mind. I went into this open-minded, and after the first song, I went, God damn it. God damn you, Jeff. God damn you, Mick Jagger. Damn you all to hell. It's just bad. You wrote a bad song, PT. It's just bad. This album is bad, and I'll give, again, Satisfaction and Gimme Shelter and Sympathy for the Devil. I'll give them their cultural due. Whether or not they're for me, I will give them their cultural due. But this album is creatively bankrupt to such a level that I briefly considered texting you and saying, "We need to quit the podcast. I can't go on. I've been destroyed. My entire will to live has been sapped by just how bad and derivative and unlistenable this garbage is." Who's giving this popular or positive reviews?
Oh, I mean, I'm pretty sure Pitchfork gave it a positive review, which Pitchfork can usually be relied upon to like give, they're tough on a lot of albums, but they'll give due where it's due, really.
I think Pitchfork dunked on him.
Did
As I
they? Is it
recall,
maybe it was
Pitchfork dunked
Rolling
on him.
Stone? It was one of the ones that I find frustrating sometimes with at least how they explain things. But there was more than one like positive impression I saw of this album, and so I was like, okay, I'll go into it. And then I heard the first song, "Angry," and there was a really cool melody line in the chorus. Just like the way that it moved was really cool, and I was like, there's no way that they that they wrote this themselves. So I looked it up, and there's some songwriter named Watt. That's it. That's just the name, Watt. Full name is Andrew Watt, but just goes by that.
He produced this
Um,
whole album, yeah.
yeah, so like that's because I was like, man, it sounds like Mick Jagger sometimes, the computer let that happen. And it sounds like the Rolling Stones, like kind of riffs and grooves and stuff, but then you hear some of these melody lines, and you're like, these fucking decrepit old fucks are not coming up with this of their own volition. So like somebody is just doing their best Mick Jagger impression and Rolling Stones impression and like writing them these songs and being like, you guys now go play it and record it. Because there were so many of these that it was clearly just not Keith Richards. It was not Mick Jagger. Their names are on it as if they wrote it, but I don't think so.
I would not allow this if I were the entertainment director at a nursing home, I would not allow this to be played at the talent show. I
I
would
wonder,
I
do you think they used AI to do these lyrics?
It sounds like it. It
I mean,
sounds like it.
I hadn't thought about that till just now, but it would make sense because they're so like they sound like Rolling Stones lyrics, but from like 1968. You know, it what the hell is Mick Jagger doing talking about a landlord?
Again, it's so frightfully out of touch that it's insulting and disturbing, but there are people that are lapping this shit up.
Yeah.
I do not. Again, it must be a nostalgia thing. And I think about that. I'm like, how's this going to happen to us? Who's it going to be? Where years from now, someone that we love, and again, we run through our favorites: Billie Eilish, Olivia Rodrigo, Tyler Childers, Casey Musgraves. So unique to us, these types of things. Mitski, is Mitski gonna end up someday being 65 years old, just creatively bankrupt and caking her pants on a nightly basis on tour after her like 19th album? It's a real possibility that
Mhm.
someone we love, multiple people we love, are gonna suck and are gonna turn out suck content and some pissy little Gen Omega podcast duo is gonna be like, never get Olivia Rodrigo fucking sucks. I never saw the appeal. My dad loved Olivia Rodrigo. He's fucking some weird thing with her. I accept that that is coming in some way, shape, or form. But you also will not find me being like, I defend this new content
Mhm.
because I loved the old content. It's just you have to take it on a I always go to Prince was incredibly prolific, and he whiffed half the time.
Mhm.
Half of his shit was unlistenable, but the stuff that hit, hit. He just had to try it out. These guys, when was the last time they released an album? Because it feels like this one wasn't released, it feels like it escaped.
That's actually a good question. I'm going to look that up because it's probably very relevant for what this album sounds like. Let's see. Rolling
You do that,
Stones.
and I'm gonna look up the lyrics to Angry to illustrate my point.
Okay, so they came out. So Hackney Diamonds just came out, obviously. So they last time they released a real one was it? It's hard to tell because they got a lot of live albums and stuff. So I don't know if it's going to be something that I'll be able to tell if it's like a studio album. So, but I think
I
it's been a while.
I think it's their someone said it was like half a decade, and I'm like, "Nah, it can't be true. They can't have
No, I
no, not
really
decade. No, what'd they say? No, maybe it was half a decade. I don't know. Let's see.
it's seem like I'm going back here. I don't know if
I'm looking through straight up studio
it might
albums.
have been like 20 years.
Sticky Fingers Live. Well, this is all fucked
Yeah.
up.
Yeah,
These are
this is
not in order, you pigs.
yeah, it's hard to tell because they have so many live albums. But either way, I think it had been a while and it shows. Um I think
2016.
okay, so it's been 7 years. I mean, that's wild that it was even that soon ago that they released an
Yeah.
album. But you know what's going to be
Oh,
funny?
it's covers, and the last original was A Bigger Bang in 2005.
Okay, so it's almost 20 years. And okay,
Yeah.
they should have left well enough alone.
They should have stayed dead and buried.
Yeah, they should have stayed dead and buried. They really it's going to be funny on their tour for this album that there's going to be songs like classics that get left off the list now for songs from this album because you know they're going to be like, oh, it's another one from the new album, and everybody's going to be. I feel like people are going to be pissed. Like we came to hear
I would be.
Satisfaction.
Yeah, I wanna hear "Start Me Up." No, we're going to do Get Closer with incredible lyrics such as, I was chatting with a ghost, wants 100 and a match, says, I know you got the money. Where's the man behind the mask? You ready for this chorus? It's a brain buster. I want to get close to you. I want to get close to you. I want to get close to you. Verse 2, I walk this way a million times with a blindfold on my eyes. It's a nighttime business with an angel in disguise. I bargain with the devil. I need heaven for one night. I can't stand this chaos. It's churning up my mind. I want to get close to you. Fuck that.
Yeah.
That sounds like they came up with that on the fucking ride on the trolley on the way to the recording session. That is
Yeah.
some bullshit.
I just watched a TikTok about the amount of times that Taylor Swift has rhymed car with bar and vice versa. And it's like a dozen times at least that she's done it. And that's this does the same thing here, talks about the landlord a few times. Lyrics like that, like nighttime business, like that an 87-year-old has no business talking about nighttime business.
You don't have to get your drugs off
Yeah.
the street anymore, man. People just give them to you for free.
Yeah, he's gonna get his blue plate special at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, go home and watch a Matlock rerun and go to bed.
Settle in.
Like, let's be real. But I'm gonna go ahead and say this album for me, surprise, surprise, I'm gonna say skip it.
Well, I'm gonna go a step further and say burn it. Burn every copy. Look, it's retailing at $30 on Amazon.
Oh God.
Well worth it to purchase it and burn it in front of God and all your friends. Film it, put it on TikTok, start a movement. This is bad. You wrote a bad song, PT. This is
Yeah.
a this is a truly the most terrible album we have listened to, bar none, all year.
Yeah, for this year for sure. Because I was like, I don't know, we've had some pretty bad ones, but I think this year, yeah, so far it takes it.
But at least, like, the Post Malone album was pretty rotten.
Yeah.
But credit where credit is due, he was trying a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It was Duran Duran syndrome, where it's like you're doing too much and only you've got a chorus, a pre-chorus, a verse, and some kind of
Mhm.
like bridge, and only one of them is working. But credit for trying. I'll take
Mhm.
a wild misfire when you have something to say versus just churning something out because it's built-in nostalgia and it's like a vanity thing. It can't be inspiration. If this is the best they can do, you guys should just walk into the sunlight and burst into flames now. Go join all your other vampire
Mhm.
friends in the afterlife.
Yeah, and I think it's time for the Rolling Stones to hang it up. I think it's officially time for that to happen. What is worse? And I think it was Vonnegut that asked the question, an artist that's living under censorship and can't create, or the artist that has nothing left to say. And I think the Rolling Stones are the artist with nothing left to say. And at this point, it's time to just cut it off. Just end it.
Just let it go. Just
Yeah.
into the dirt you go, boys. And I tell you what, I know this discussion was probably upsetting for a lot of people. Maybe people
It might
rage
be.
quit the episode.
Yeah, it might be.
Maybe they stuck with it until the end. But there's going to be a lot of people with strong opinions about this episode, and I guarantee you, we're going to hear from some of them at youtube.com/c/out on that line. That's right. This episode's not a total wash, okay? We're doing a bit at the end. I want people to unleash their most hurtful I want you to say mean, deplorable things about my looks. I want you to insult me as a person and a lover. How does a guy like that go home and fuck his wife? Well, guess what? I don't have a wife. I have a girlfriend. So I guess you've just got bad musical opinions and you're stupid and ill-informed because you know about Girlfriend of the Pod, if you listened to the show, if you were subscribed, if you had your notifications turned on, God damn you, if you liked the videos, if you left comments regularly. We're trying to create a community. Now, yes, the bedrock of it is hatred and vitriol and hot takes, but countries have been built on less. And we are trying to build a strong, sovereign nation of people who just want good music. That's all we're in search of is good music. This podcast is not about trying to hate on stuff. We're trying to find stuff to love. We're trying to find stuff to explore. I do not wish to explore Mick Jagger. I don't know anyone that does. I'd be scared of what I'd find. Probably the corpses of a couple gerbils and some old bags of heroin, I'm sure. So I gotta tell you guys, if this offends you, if this upsets you, you go ahead and take aim at the nougaty center of our hearts on youtube.com/c/out on that line. That's right. Fire away.
I have nothing to add after that. That was fantastic. Until next time.